10 months, but it was better than being a lit match in a town she'd already doused in gasoline. She had a job, with a timesheet even, and a stolid brick of a boyfriend who paid his share of the rent. Her gunshot wound was healing nicely. Little successes, but that didn't mean she wasn't proud of them. It was on that thought that Charlie looked up to see a test of her resolve walk through the double doors of Rapture Bar and Lounge. Doreen Kowalski's face looked hot and blotchy with crying. She'd obviously tried to fix her makeup, but had wiped her mascara so hard that it winged out to one side. Back in high school, she wouldn't have given Charlie the time of day, and she probably didn't want to tonight either. There are countless differences between the lives of people with money and people without. One is this: without the means to pay experts, it's necessary to evolve a complex ecosystem of useful amateurs. When Charlie's dad got what the doctor told him was a skin cancer, he drank a fifth of Maker's Mark and asked a butcher friend to cut a divot out of his shoulder, because there was no way he could afford a surgeon. When Charlie's friend's cousin got married, they asked Mrs. Silva from 3 blocks over to make their wedding cake, because she loved to bake and had fancy pastry-piping doodads. And if the buttercream was a little grainy or one of the layers was a bit overbaked, well, it was still sweet and just as tall as a cake in a magazine, and it cost only the price of supplies. In the world of shadow magic, Charlie was a successful thief. But to the locals, she would always be a useful amateur, willing to palm a wedding ring or retrieve a dog-napped pit bull. Charlie Hall, drawn to a bad idea like a moth to a wool sweater. Every hustle an opportunity to let her worst impulses out to play. "I need to talk to you," Doreen said loudly, reaching for Charlie as she passed. It had been a slow night at the lounge, but Odette, the ancient, semi-retired dominatrix who owned the place, was sitting at a table out front, gossiping with her cronies. She'd noticed if Charlie chatted to one person for too long, and Charlie couldn't afford to lose this gig. Bartending at Rapture was a lucky break, given her track record. It had been arranged by Balthazar, who ran a shadow parlor out of the basement, speakeasy style, and had good reasons to keep an eye on her. Not the least of which was that he wanted her to come back to work for him. And as Charlie looked over at Doreen and that familiar excitement stirred in her, she felt the precariousness of her commitment to the straight and narrow, like a strategy for success that's only the word profit with a lot of exclamation points. "Can I get you a drink?" she asked Doreen. Doreen shook her head. "You have to help me find Adam. He disappeared again, and I—" "Can't talk now," Charlie interrupted. "Order something to keep my boss off my back. Club soda and bitters, cranberry and lime, whatever. It's on me." Doreen's wet, red-rimmed eyes suggested that she'd have a hard time waiting, or that she'd had a few drinks before she arrived. Maybe both. "Hey!" one of the regulars called, and Charlie turned away to take his order, made a cosmopolitan that spilled ruby red out of the shaker, topped it with a tiny pellet of dry ice that sent smoke wafting up, as though from a potion. She checked on another table, a guy who was nursing a beer, trembling fingers applying a third nicotine patch to his inner arm. He wanted to keep his tab open. Charlie poured a shot of 4 Roses for a tweedy guy in dirty glasses who looked like he'd been sleeping in his clothes and told her he didn't like his bourbon too sweet. Then she crossed to the other end of the bar, pausing to make a whiskey and ginger for Balthazar himself when he waved her over. "Got a job for you," he said under his breath. With his flashing eyes, light brown skin, and curls long enough to be pulled back into a disreputable ponytail, he lorded over his shadow parlor, making the town's corrupt dreams come true. "Nope," Charlie said, moving on. "Come on. Night Singh got murdered in his bed, and the room was trashed. Someone made off with his personal folio of magical discoveries." Balthazar called after her, unconvinced. "This is what you were best at." "Nope," she called back as cheerfully as she could manage. Fuck Night Singh. He had been the first glomist ever to contract Charlie's services, back when she was just a kid. As far as she was concerned, he could rot in his grave. But that still didn't mean she was going to rob it. Charlie was out of the game. She'd been too good at it.